You were born here,
I was.
which always seems to me a very special thing, being born on an island.
I think it is special. I have lots of friends were also born here, who I've lived here with, but because I don't live here anymore, I also have friends who come over on holiday, and I think they do think of it differently. They do think of Alderney differently. A lot of people have heard of Guernsey, and some people have heard of Jersey, but not very many people have heard of Alderney. There's been one person I've met who, apart from family and friends, people who I see normally, there's one person, a stranger that I've met, who's actually known about Alderney and visited Alderney. And weirdly, I met them in Texas in America, but he'd heard about it, so yeah.
Heard about it,
Yeah.
but hadn't actually been here.
I think he'd been to Guernsey. I was wearing a jumper that had Alderney written on it, and he saw that.
And picked up.
I was visiting a church, and he worked in the church, and he saw it and said, "Oh, you're from Alderney. I know about Alderney. I've been to Guernsey." But other people, they kind of know about the bailiwick of Guernsey, and they do find it interesting. Yeah, it's a bit more exotic. It's still English, but it is more interesting than coming from the mainland. Yeah, definitely. And I think it makes a difference personally when you're travelling, because you've got the kind of the hard barrier of the sea, and you spend a lot of time, if you're flying, you spend a lot of time, you're separated like that. But also it means that the culture's a bit different, I think.
Yeah.
It does feel kind of, I'm not stuck in the past, but it does feel a bit sort of old-fashioned and more kind of rural, and possibly people say Alderney feels like what the UK might have felt like kind of in the 50s or in the 60s. It's not stuck in the past, but it's developed more slowly. Yeah, so it seems it's safer. You can walk around as a kid. There's no big city, obviously, because the islands are too small for a city. The pace of life is slower because everybody's living, and no one's worrying about commuting or spending hours on a train or going around and dodging cars or anything. It does feel calmer, and it does feel more kind of relaxed. I learned to drive in that car park as well. That's where when I was having driving lessons and when I did my driving exam, because I learnt here in Alderney, we start there. The exam starts and ends there because it's so quiet. So airport car parks are not supposed to be nice, relaxing places, but this one's so quiet that we start and finish our driving exams there.
Well, that's really nice.
Yeah, and
that's
do the parking and reversing and everything. I was 9 when we moved to Portsmouth. I've done it twice now. I've done the kind of Alderney to UK transition twice, most recently last year in October of 2021, and longer ago when I was 9. It was very different. I was living by the sea still, so Alderney, obviously the sea is everywhere. You can see the sea from almost every part of the island except right in the middle. And then if you're high up, you can still see the horizon. But we moved to a city called Portsmouth, which is in the south of England, on the south coast. And the only thing that Alderney and Portsmouth have in common, really, is that they are on the sea. And even then I noticed that their sea was very different. The sea in Alderney there are lots of beaches and they're all sand, and the sea it's a bit grey today, but the sea is lovely and blue, and it's very clean, and it's lovely to go swimming even when it's cold. The sea in Portsmouth was sort of less clean.
Choosing your phrase.
Less clean. I don't want to offend anybody who lives in Portsmouth. It was lovely living in Portsmouth, but it was much busier, and obviously the city was much busier. The road we lived on was very busy. I thought was very busy, and now, having lived in other parts of the UK, I know it wasn't. It just seemed very busy.
So it's all comparative.
Exactly, yeah. The school was much, much bigger. Sort of a factor of 30 times bigger, I think, or more than that, because it was about 30 times bigger. When I was here, I went to a school that had 30 people in, which seemed normal. I didn't think that was small. At one point, I was in a class of 5 people, and I was the only boy. And the head teacher was my godmother, so and it seemed completely normal. I didn't realise that wasn't normal. And then I went to the UK, and the school I went to there was 1,000 people, which for the UK is normal. That's on the smaller side. It was a grammar school, and some grammar schools and some state schools are 2 or 3 times bigger than that. But the school I went to was about 1,000 people big, and I didn't even know everybody in my year group, which was a weird feeling. Yeah, and physically it was much bigger too, obviously, to fit 1,000 people in. It was spread over different buildings. You had to cross a main road to get to a different part of the school.
Wow.
And that was very different. Yeah. And of course the road was not a lovely Alderney road. It wasn't a kind of lovely empty road. It had cars on constantly, and there was a lollipop lady telling us when we could cross the road, and that was all new. I think going to the UK was really good because obviously there are more schools. There's a kind of a wider range of things to do in a bigger place, which is just part of it. And coming back here, you do realise that there's sort of a very dedicated group of adults who have the experience of living in other places and doing other things, who make opportunities in Alderney happen, but inevitably they are kind of less, just because there are fewer people. And that's probably the case for small villages everywhere. I think it was very important for me. I was very lucky that even though I moved off the island, I kept coming back. I think I would be a different person had I left and not carried on visiting. But I don't think that was an option, really. I don't think you can cut ties with Alderney. I don't know anybody who's done that, really. I think it would be difficult to do because it's so nice. I agree. I think that's one of the reasons it's so kind of attractive to people and mysterious as well, because a lot of people, I think, some people, you're right, don't really get it, and that's fine. I've got friends in the UK who there's sort of no interest in staying somewhere rural, wherever it is, and I think that's a shame. But there's definitely something that for a lot of people attracts them, which is why when you say, I'm from Alderney, they're intrigued, because I think they suspect that it has that kind of relaxing therapeutic effect. Yeah. The first time I ever invited people was when I was about 14, I think, and I invited 2 friends from school over, Chip and Tom, and this is a really long time ago. And I remember one of them really liked it, and the other guy enjoyed the holiday but wasn't particularly attached to Alderney. And I think that made me slightly wary of inviting people, because I see Alderney in a really special light. To me, it's a really kind of personally important place, and I have lots of family living here, and I think that's one of the reasons I feel that way. Or some family also in Guernsey now. I don't mean to say I was offended, but I think it's kind of a personal thing, because I think when I'm not in Alderney, I think about Alderney quite a lot, and I think a lot of the way I am, I'm quite a reserved person, I'm quite a patient person, a very relaxed person. I think that's because partly I've lived in Alderney and spent a lot of time in Alderney, and so when someone doesn't really find enjoyable about Alderney the things that I enjoy, I think I sort of slightly then thought, well, that's kind of, the way Alderney is in that sense is kind of the way I am as well. So that was sort of slightly reconsidering the friendship. Not that seriously, but just thinking like, oh, it's interesting that they didn't like the slower pace, or it wasn't for them, because I really like that. But I was then quite a long time before I invited people over. And the next time I did, that was at school when I was 14. The next time I did, it was almost 10 years later at university. Wow. And I invited 2 friends over from my university, and they both loved it, and they wanted to spend longer here. They want to come back. They couldn't, sadly, because of pandemic stuff and everything that's been happening the last couple of years. I'd love to have them back. And after that, one of them said to me, "I now understand you much better."
That's
and she sort of said it as a joke, but I think there's truth to that. That sort of reaffirmed my friendship with them. I think it was nice. I was really happy. I was kind of proud that they'd said that.
So you do take it personally to some degree?
I think so. I don't know if that's it's quite a big claim to make, but yeah, I guess I do, because the way people have responded to Alderney has factored into my kind of connection to them. Yeah, people do have different responses to it as well. I think it's because it doesn't change as quickly as other places might do, or the kind of the turnover of people or just things or kind of ideas or fashions or something is slower. It's lovely to come back to, because it's sort of there's a familiarity to everything, and there's literal familiarity because I know it, and people who come over every year know the island. But for new people, I think it's still got a kind of familiarity in a more sort of general sense, because it's how a lot of other places maybe have been, or how we think of places in the past. I'm sure it's kind of familiar to people who have lived in seaside places around the world, or smaller places around the world, and it's comforting because of that. If things are changing a lot, I have recently moved flat in London, and where I am in London, although I'm not that far away from where I used to live, it's so different because there's a lot of different local kind of zones. London's split up into boroughs, and they're all kind of changing and adapting, and there's lots of building happening, and there's sort of revitalisation happening, and massive buildings going up and stuff. And it doesn't feel, although I'm sort of a 5-minute walk from where I used to live, it feels new, and it's quite, I'm settling into it. I've been there for a few months. Alderney doesn't really do that. You can go away for kind of 5 or 6 years, come back,
and your cup of tea still sits
it
on the
feels
side.
the same. You're sort of, you've still sort of got a dent on the sofa or something. It still feels very, very homey. Yeah, it's a kind of it's physically relaxing to come back, because it's sort of, the pace of life is slower, and if you're here you can do a lot of nice things outdoors. You can go for lovely walks, you can go swimming, there's a lot of wildlife you can see. I think it's mentally relaxing because it doesn't evolve and doesn't turn over that quickly. It's sort of a slow burn. Yeah, but you have everything you need. It's perfectly modern, but it's not sort of fast-paced. I love phoning up the radio station, the local radio station, and asking them to play specific songs, because there's the ratio of sort of inhabitants of Alderney to the sort of, I don't know, the representatives or leaders or people in, specific jobs, doctors, presenters, journalists, things like that, is so small that everybody does have a personal relationship with them. If you go and see your doctor, you know your doctor. My mum, for example, is really good friends with the doctor who's recently retired. They would go swimming together every morning. We can phone up people who work at the airport and ask them information on flights, and then we sort of catch up and talk about family.
Yes,
which is lovely. Yeah, and you can stop the president in the street, and you might not know everybody, but everybody can talk to him, which is really nice. Yeah, and a lot of people retire here as well, and I think that what you were saying about lots of people have sort of different jobs or have different backgrounds. The thing that they have in common when they retire here is that they kind of want that more relaxed. It's almost an anonymity thing.
Mm.
Everybody is the same here because there's no need to try to be above or to stand out for any particular reason. Everybody kind of wants the peace of a friendly and kind of inclusive, even if it's small, community.
And supportive.
Yeah, and it's supportive as well. Yeah.
Tobes, that's brilliant. Thanks so much.
You're
Excellent.
welcome. Thank you for having me.
Take it.